I buried my husband 6 months ago, stood at his grave until my legs went numb, until the cold stone beneath my fingers felt warmer than my own skin. 41 years of mornings waking to his cough, nights listening to him turn pages in the dark. Then silence. That morning I went to the grocery store because grief does not excuse an empty refrigerator. I stood in the canned goods aisle staring at rows of beans and soups, thinking how strange it was that life kept moving so normally when mine had stopped. I reached for a jar of tomato sauce, the thick kind with basil that Thomas always preferred, and that was when I heard it, his voice, not loud, just a soft cough followed by a muttered complaint about prices. The exact tone I had listened to for 4 decades drifting from the kitchen while he read the paper. My hand froze midair. The jar slipped. It shattered on the tile, red splattering like blood. People gasped. Someone asked if I was okay. I turned slowly. There he was, 3 shelves down, holding a basket, comparing labels the way he always did, tilting his head, squinting at the fine print. Broad shoulders slightly hunched now, silver hair refusing to lie flat, scar above the right eyebrow from the ladder fall he laughed about for years. Thomas, I whispered his name, then louder, Thomas. He turned. For one terrible second I expected recognition, shock, guilt, anything. Instead his face showed only polite confusion. "I'm sorry," he said carefully. "I think you have me mistaken for someone else." The words landed harder than the broken glass. I stepped closer, voice cracking. "No, Thomas, it's me, Eleanor, your wife." He took a small step back. That retreat cut deepest. Thomas never stepped away from me, not once in 41 years. "My name is Daniel Brooks," he said gently. "I don't know you." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, opened the photo from his last birthday, us on the porch, his arm around my shoulders. "Look, you burned the steaks, blamed the grill." He glanced. Something flickered, jaw tightening, eyes pausing too long. Then he shook his head. "I've never seen that photo. You must be going through something difficult." He placed a hand on my shoulder, the same warmth, same weight he always used to calm me. I stared at his left hand. "Show me your fingers." He frowned but lifted it. The crooked pinky broken at 15 fixing his mother's roof, the one I teased him about when we held hands. My stomach dropped. "I have to go," he said quickly, already turning away. "I hope you feel better." He walked toward checkout. I stood frozen while an employee cleaned red sauce at my feet. People whispered, "Poor woman." They were wrong. I wasn't poor. I was terrified, because if Thomas was alive, then who had I buried? I followed him. He paid with cash, folded bills flat with his thumb the way Thomas always did, loaded bags into an old white sedan with a dented rear door, not our car, but the same careful placement. Heavy items first, bread on top, eggs last. I memorized the plate. He drove. I followed 3 cars back, heart hammering so loud I thought he'd hear it. We turned into a modest neighborhood, pale green house, white picket fence, wind chimes on the porch. A woman mid-50s, dark hair, lived in sweater, opened the door and kissed his cheek. 2 children, 8 and 10, ran out screaming "Grandpa," and climbed him while he balanced bags. He laughed, that lopsided, warm laugh I thought I'd never hear again. I sat in my car halfway down the street and cried steady, silent tears. 41 years, 6 months of mourning. And he was here, alive, holding grandchildren who weren't mine. I took out my phone and photographed everything, the house number, the car plate, his profile through the windshield. My hands shook so badly the first few shots blurred, but a few were clear enough. As the light began to fade, I started the engine and drove away. I don't remember the drive home. Only sitting in the garage afterward, staring at my phone, zooming in on his face again and again. Every line matched, every shadow. When I finally went inside my empty house, one question echoed louder than anything else. If Thomas was alive, then who had I buried? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a single lamp on, the rest of the house swallowed by darkness. My phone lay beside old photo albums spread open like evidence at a crime scene. I moved between them slowly, deliberately, as if speed might break whatever fragile thread was holding me together. I zoomed in on the photos I had taken that afternoon, his face as he turned toward the house, his profile through the car window. Then I looked down at pictures from our past. Our wedding day, his first gray hair, a beach photo from years ago where his shirt rode up slightly. Every detail matched. The scar above the eyebrow from the ladder fall, the small mole near his collarbone he hated because it made him self-conscious, even the slight unevenness in his ears that only I ever noticed. These were not things grief invented. These were facts etched by time. I pressed my fingers to my lips to stop them from trembling. Twins did not share scars. Strangers did not share memories written into flesh. At 3:40 a.m., I stopped pacing and picked up my phone. I called my son. It rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, Lucas answered, voice thick with sleep. "Mom, do you know what time it is? I need you to come over right now," I said. A pause. "Mom, it's the middle of the night." "Did something happen?" "Yes," I said. "Something happened. Another pause, longer this time. Mom, if this is about Dad again, we talked about this. You've been through a lot. Grief can do strange things. I saw him yesterday, I said. I saw your father alive. Silence. Then a breath, sharp, controlled. Stay there, he said finally. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming. The call ended. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, hair pulled back without care, a face that looked older than it had 6 months ago. When Lucas arrived 40 minutes later, he didn't knock. He let himself in just like he used to when he was a teenager. He found me back at the kitchen table, surrounded by photos. Mom, he said softly, what is going on? I handed him my phone first. I did not speak. I watched his face as he scrolled. At first there was confusion, then disbelief, then something else. Fear. He swallowed hard and handed the phone back. He looks like Dad, he said carefully. I showed him the close-up of the crooked pinky. People don't share scars. He looked away, jaw tight. In that moment, before he said another word, I knew whatever truth he had been carrying was finally breaking him too. Lucas did not start the car. He sat there gripping the steering wheel, forehead resting against it, shoulders shaking. When he finally spoke, his first words were a whisper. Mom, I'm so sorry. Lucas arrived 40 minutes later. He didn't knock. He let himself in the way he always had, keys still on his ring, habit unbroken even after years away. I heard the front door open softly, then close, footsteps in the hall. He found me at the kitchen table, photo albums open, my phone beside them showing the clearest shot. Thomas turning toward the pale green house, crooked pinky visible as he lifted a grocery bag. Lucas stopped in the doorway. His face was pale under the kitchen light, thinner than I remembered, shadows under his eyes. Mom, he said quietly, what is going on? I didn't speak at first. I simply pushed the phone toward him. He took it, scrolled slowly. At first confusion creased his brow, then disbelief widened his eyes, then fear, sharp, unmistakable, tightened his jaw. He handed the phone back without a word. He looks like Dad, he said, voice careful, measured. The same tone he used when he was a teenager and knew he'd been caught. I opened the close-up photo, the one that showed the crooked pinky in sharp detail. People don't share scars. He rubbed his face with both hands. Looked away toward the dark window. Did you see the body, Lucas? I asked. No, he whispered. They said it was bad, closed casket. You were in no shape to argue. Take me back there, I said, standing, right now. I want you to see him with your own eyes, so you can tell me I'm imagining things. He hesitated long enough that the silence answered before his mouth did. Mom, this isn't healthy. Are you coming? I said, or am I going alone? He exhaled, defeated. Fine, we'll go so you can see it's not him, so you can let this go. We drove in silence. The streets were empty, sodium lights casting long shadows. When we turned onto the quiet street with the pale green house, my heart began to race again, not with hope, but with something colder. That's the one, I said. Lucas parked a short distance away. We sat watching. After a few minutes, the front door opened. Thomas Daniel stepped out, coat over one arm, keys in hand. He walked to the white sedan, opened the door, paused to glance at the sky as if checking for rain. Lucas leaned forward. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. He stared unmoving as Thomas got in and drove past us, close enough that we could see the familiar profile through the windshield. When the car disappeared around the corner, Lucas didn't move. Tears streamed down his cheeks before he made a sound. Mom, he whispered. I waited. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened, shoulders shook. Then the words came small, broken. I'm so sorry. Sorry meant guilt. Sorry meant knowledge. Sorry meant this was never just in my head. Tell me, I said. My voice sounded distant even to me. Tell me right now. He lifted his head, eyes red, raw, filled with shame I had never seen in them before. Dad didn't die in that accident. The words hung between us, final, heavy. I nodded once. Go on. He took a breath as if preparing to dive underwater. He had another family, for over 20 years, Claudia. The kids call him Grandpa. It started as something else. A mistake, he said. Then it never ended. He lived 2 lives. The marina business kept him traveling, long stretches away. I defended it to you when friends asked why he was gone so much. And you knew, 3 years, Lucas admitted. I found out by accident, helping with paperwork from the business, duplicate bills, utilities, insurance, 2 households. I confronted him. He begged me not to tell you, said it would destroy you, said if you found out, you'd take half of everything, the business, the house, everything he built. Everything we built, I corrected quietly. He nodded miserably. 6 months ago, he came to me with a plan, said he wanted to end the double life, be with her full time, but divorce would cost too much, so he decided it would be easier if you thought he was dead. Easier for whom? For him, Lucas whispered. And for me, I turned to him sharply. For you, he looked away. If he died, everything passed to me automatically. Business assets, accounts. He transferred most of the money first, under a different name. The rest came to me. I thought I could take care of you, give you an allowance, make sure you were okay. An allowance, I repeated, like a child, like a stranger. How did he fake it? I asked. My voice was eerily calm. There was a man homeless, terminally ill, no family except a niece he barely knew. Dad paid him, paid the niece, staged the accident, used his documents. The body was badly damaged. Casket stayed closed. I stared at the empty street where Thomas's car had disappeared. You let me bury a stranger, I said. Yes, you let me mourn him. Yes, you watched me fall apart for 6 months. I didn't know how to stop it once it started, he whispered. I thought if enough time passed you'd heal, that it would be kinder this way. Kinder, I laughed then, a short, bitter sound with no humor in it. You stole my right to the truth. You stole my grief and replaced it with a lie. I closed my eyes, breathed slowly, carefully. Take me home, I said. Mom, we need to talk about this. Take me home. He started the car. Neither of us spoke on the drive back. When we arrived, I got out without looking at him. Mom, please, he called after me. I didn't answer. Inside my house, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at the life I thought I had lived. 41 years of loyalty, of compromise, of believing in the man beside me. It had all been a performance. And now that I knew the truth, one thing was clear. I was done being the woman who cried in silence. Whatever came next, it would not be forgiveness. It would be reckoning. 3 days later, I walked into a private investigator's office and said 4 words I never thought I'd say. My husband is legally dead. I need proof he isn't. 3 days of silence had done their work. I no longer paced the house at night. I no longer stared at the empty side of the bed wondering where Thomas had gone. The grief that had hollowed me out for 6 months had burned itself clean, leaving behind something sharper, purpose. On the 4th morning I woke before dawn, showered slowly under hot water until my skin felt like my own again, and dressed in the charcoal slacks and cream sweater I used to wear when I wanted to feel composed. I looked in the mirror, not the widow people pitied, but a woman who had decided enough was enough. I drove downtown to a narrow building I'd passed 1,000 times without noticing. 3rd floor, frosted glass door, simple black letters. Private Investigations, Harlan and Associates. No frills, just competence. The man behind the desk was in his late 60s, thinning gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, eyes that had seen too many secrets to be surprised by anything. He studied me for a long moment without speaking. I need to find someone, I said, sitting without being asked. He's legally dead, but he isn't. That got his attention. I told him the facts, not the 41 years of shared breakfasts, not the way Thomas used to hum off-key while shaving, not the nights I waited up when his business trips stretched too long, just the cold details. The accident, the closed casket, the grocery store sighting, the pale green house, the woman named Claudia, the children calling him Grandpa, the new name Daniel Brooks. I laid my phone on the desk and showed him the photos, blurry at first from shaking hands, clearer when I zoomed in on the scar, the crooked pinky, the familiar way he carried the grocery bags. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back, steepled his fingers. If what you're saying is accurate, this isn't infidelity anymore. This is identity fraud, financial concealment, possibly conspiracy to defraud an insurance company. It will take time. It will cost money. I can pay, I said. I want proof, not suspicion. Documents, bank records, property deeds, phone logs, everything that shows he planned this and executed it. He named a number. I wrote the check without hesitation. I want the truth in black and white, I told him, so no one can call me delusional again. He gave me a small, dry smile. I can do that. I left the office lighter, not because hope had returned, but because I had finally handed part of the weight to someone else. For the next 7 days, I moved through my days like a ghost in my own life. I returned to the quiet street with the pale green house at different hours, early morning, late afternoon, dusk, always wearing a scarf and sunglasses, parking in different spots, pretending to read a newspaper or check my phone. I learned his routines without emotion. Left at 7:45 a.m. sharp, returned around 6:15 p.m., weekends spent in the yard with the children or driving them to soccer. Sundays, they all went to church. Neighbors waved. He waved back, a good man, they would have said. I watched Claudia rest her hand on his arm the way I once did. I watched him smile with the ease of someone who believed the past was safely buried. It wasn't. The investigator called exactly 1 week later. I have enough for a full report. You should come in. The folder he handed me across the desk was thick, almost 2 inches, heavy, real. I opened it slowly. First page. A birth certificate for Daniel Brooks issued in 2018, 2 years before Thomas's death. No prior records under that name before then. Bank statements followed. Accounts opened under Daniel Brooks shortly after the supposed accident. Nearly $1.8 million transferred in stages from joint accounts I had never questioned. Transfers signed with a signature close enough to mine to fool a teller, but not close enough to fool me. Utility bills, property tax records, car registration, all tying Daniel Brooks to the pale greenhouse for the past 6 years, and cross-referenced addresses showing a second household under Thomas's name going back 23 years. Then the phone logs, multiple calls, regular, long between Thomas's old number and Lucas's phone in the months before the accident, and after. During the weeks I thought I was alone in the house, grieving. During the nights I cried into pillows that still smelled faintly of his aftershave. Lucas hadn't just known, he had stayed involved. I closed the folder with careful hands. "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded once. "What happens next is up to you." I walked out into pale winter sunlight. The folder felt like armor under my arm. This was no longer about rage or even justice in the dramatic sense. It was about dignity. About refusing to let 41 years be erased by a lie. About making sure the truth existed somewhere outside my own head, on paper, in records, in courts if necessary. They thought my silence these past 6 months meant I was broken. They thought grief would keep me quiet forever. They were wrong. The next morning, I made an appointment with a fraud attorney and placed a small digital recorder in my purse. When Lucas answered my call, inviting him to lunch, to talk and understand, the relief in his voice told me he still believed I was the same mother who would always forgive. He had no idea I was recording every word. I chose the small Italian place on Maple Street, the one Thomas and I used to go to on quiet anniversaries. Dim lighting, red-checkered tablecloths, booths deep enough for private conversation. Familiar enough to feel safe, neutral enough that Lucas wouldn't suspect anything. I arrived early, slipped the small digital recorder into the side pocket of my purse, tested it twice under the table, red light blinked once, steady. I ordered water with lemon and waited. When Lucas walked in, he looked thinner than I remembered, dark circles under his eyes. He scanned the room, spotted me, and forced a relieved smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Thank God you called. I've been worried sick. You didn't answer my texts, my calls. I needed time," I said quietly. "To think," he reached across the table as if to take my hand. I let him for a moment, then gently pulled back. "I don't want to fight anymore," I continued, keeping my voice soft, almost tired. "I just need to understand everything, so I can finally move forward." Relief washed over his face like warm water. "Of course, anything you want to know, I swear." The waiter brought menus. We ordered pasta for him, salad for me. Simple, safe. I let him talk first. About how hard the last 6 months had been for him too, how he hated keeping secrets, how he thought he was protecting me. I nodded, listened. "Ask gentle questions. When did the plan actually start?" I asked after the food arrived. He twirled spaghetti on his fork. "About 8 months before the accident. Dad came to me one night after you went to bed. Said he couldn't keep living 2 lives anymore. Said Claudia was pregnant again, another kid on the way, and he wanted to be there full time. But a divorce. He said you'd take half the marina business, half the house, half the savings. Everything we built, I echoed softly. He winced. He said if he just disappeared, the assets would pass to me automatically. No probate fight, no division. He'd transfer most of it to new accounts under Daniel Brooks first, then quietly move the rest to me over time. I'd take care of you, give you an allowance, make sure the house stayed paid off. He said it was the cleanest way. Cleanest, I repeated. The word tasted metallic. He looked down at his plate. I tried to talk him out of it. I did, but he kept saying you'd be better off not knowing the truth. That the truth would destroy you more than thinking he was gone. "And the body?" I asked, voice still calm. He swallowed. "There was a man, homeless, terminal cancer. No family except a niece who barely knew him. Dad paid her $50,000 to sign off on the identification. Paid the man enough to cover his last months in comfort. They staged the car wreck, swapped documents at the hospital. The injuries were bad enough that no one looked twice at the dental records. Closed casket. Everyone accepted it. I sipped my water, let silence settle. "And you signed things," I said gently. "Transfers. Authorizations." He nodded miserably. "A few, mostly after. He needed my signature on some of the business sales. Said it was to liquidate quietly so nothing looked suspicious. I thought once it was done, I could make it right. Give you more than enough, protect you." I reached into my purse as if looking for a tissue. Pressed record again, just to be sure. How much did he move in total? About $1.8 million from the joint accounts and business reserves. Some went to Claudia's name for the house, the kids' college funds. The rest, he kept most under Daniel. Said he'd send you regular payments so you'd never struggle. But he didn't. "No," Lucas whispered. "He said it was safer to wait. That if anything looked off, the insurance company might investigate." I let that sit. Then quietly, "Where are the records now? The duplicates, the emails, the transfer confirmations?" He hesitated. Then, "In my office at the warehouse. Locked drawer, I kept copies just in case." I nodded slowly. We finished the meal in near silence. He talked a little more about how guilty he felt, how he wanted to make it up to me. I listened without interrupting. When the check came, I paid. He thanked me, hugged me awkwardly in the parking lot. "I love you, Mom," he said against my shoulder. "I know," I answered. I drove straight home. By the time I pulled into the garage, my attorney had already received the audio file I emailed from the restaurant parking lot. She called within minutes. "Every word is clear," she said. Confession to conspiracy, fraud, forgery, identity theft. Combined with the pies folder, the bank trails, the fake birth certificate, the phone logs, this is airtight. "What happens next?" I asked. "We file the criminal complaint this afternoon. Fraud division will move fast, warrants by tomorrow morning if not sooner. Your son will be taken into custody quietly. No media circus. The identity under Daniel Brooks will be invalidated immediately. Accounts frozen. Assets frozen pending restitution." I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Thomas used to read the paper every Sunday. "And Thomas, they'll arrest him at the house. Claudia will be questioned. If she truly knew nothing, she walks. If she helped conceal assets, different story. But the children will be protected either way." I thanked her and hung up. For the first time in 6 months, the house didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like the place where I would finally stand up. The next morning my phone rang at 6:12 a.m. It was my attorney. "Warrants are issued. Your son was taken into custody 20 minutes ago. No resistance. And they're en route to the pale green house right now." The phone rang at 6:12 a.m., pulling me from the first deep sleep I'd had in weeks. I answered before the second ring. "Eleanor," my attorney said. Her voice was calm, professional, the way it always was. "Warrants are issued. Your son was taken into custody 20 minutes ago. No resistance. He's being processed downtown right now." I sat up slowly in bed. The room was still dark, curtains drawn against the winter morning. The house felt unnaturally quiet. No coffee maker gurgling, no radio in the kitchen, no Thomas humming off-key while he shaved. "And Thomas?" I asked. "They're en route to the pale green house. 2 detectives and a patrol unit. They'll take him into custody quietly. No sirens, no show for the neighbors. Claudia will be questioned on site. If she cooperates and had no knowledge of the fraud, she's likely released today. The children's social services will be called as a precaution, but they'll stay with her unless evidence shows otherwise." I exhaled slowly. "The identity, Daniel Brooks, is being formally invalidated as we speak. The birth certificate, driver's license, social security number, everything tied to that name is flagged as fraudulent. Bank accounts are frozen. Property records are being flagged for seizure pending restitution. The marina business assets that were transferred, they're locked until the court sorts ownership." I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street was still asleep under a thin layer of frost. The world looked the same as it had yesterday, but it wasn't. "What happens to Lucas now?" I asked. "He'll be arraigned this afternoon. Given the evidence you're recording, the pies folder, the bank trails, his own admissions, he'll likely face charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, aiding and abetting identity theft, and financial exploitation of an elder. The DA is pushing for a plea to avoid a long trial. If he cooperates fully, he could get 5 to 7 years, possibly less with good behavior, but he will serve time." I closed my eyes. "He knew what he was doing." "Yes," she said gently. "He did. We spoke for a few more minutes, logistics, next steps, how to prepare for any media if word leaked. When I hung up, I didn't cry, I didn't pace. I simply stood there, letting the silence settle around me like a blanket. For 6 months, I had lived in a house that felt like a museum of a life that never fully existed. Photos on the mantel showing smiles I now questioned. The side of the closet still holding Thomas's shirts, pressed and waiting. The empty coffee mug he used every morning, still in the drainer because I couldn't bear to put it away. I walked to the mantel now. Lifted the wedding photo, us on the courthouse steps, young and certain. I carried it to the garage, set it on the concrete floor beside the hammer I'd used once to hang pictures. I didn't smash it, not yet. I just looked at it for a long minute. Then I carried it back inside and placed it face down in a drawer. By noon, the news had begun to trickle through family channels. A cousin texted, "Is it true about Lucas? Police at the warehouse." An old friend called, "Eleanor, what's happening? People are saying Thomas is alive." I didn't answer any of them, not yet. At 2:17 p.m., my attorney called again. Thomas Daniel was arrested at the residence. He didn't resist. "Claudia is cooperating fully. She says she believed he was a widower when they met. No charges against her so far. The children are with her under supervision. And Eleanor, he asked to speak with you, through his public defender, one time. He wants to explain." I let the words hang. "No," I said. "There's nothing left to explain." She didn't push. "Understood. The DA is moving to freeze all remaining assets and begin restitution proceedings. You'll get back what was yours, half the business value, the house equity that was concealed, the insurance payout that should have come to you. It won't be quick, but it will happen." I thanked her and hung up. That afternoon I drove, not to the pale green house, but to the cemetery where a stranger lay under Thomas's name. I stood at the headstone for the first time since the funeral. The grass had grown over the edges now. The carved letters looked smaller somehow. I didn't speak to the grave. I didn't cry. I simply placed a single white tulip, Thomas's favorite, on the stone and walked away. Back home, the house was still quiet. But it no longer felt haunted. It felt like the beginning of something mine. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and opened my laptop. For the first time in 6 months, I searched not for answers about Thomas, but for things I might want to do next. A gardening class, a book club, a small trip somewhere warm. The phone stayed silent for the rest of the day. No more calls from family asking what happened. No more messages from Lucas. Just the soft tick of the clock and the sound of my own breathing, steady, even, alive. 3 weeks later, the call came at dawn. My attorney's voice was gentle but firm. "Eleanor, Thomas suffered a heart attack in the holding facility last night. He didn't make it. You're still listed as next of kin." The frost had melted by mid-morning, leaving the streets slick and reflective under a pale sun. I drove the familiar route, not hiding this time. No scarf or sunglasses, no parking blocks away. I turned onto the quiet street with the pale greenhouse and pulled directly into the driveway behind the white sedan with the dented rear door. I sat for a moment with the engine off, hands steady on the wheel. The wind chimes on the porch moved gently in the breeze. Somewhere inside, children's laughter drifted through an open window, ordinary, innocent sounds that made my chest tighten. I stepped out, folder of legal documents tucked under my arm like a shield. No hammer, no rage, just truth printed and notarized. I rang the bell. Claudia answered. Mid-50s, dark hair pulled into a loose knot, still in her morning sweater. She smiled politely at first, the smile of someone used to neighbors dropping by, then recognition flickered when she saw my face. The same face she must have glimpsed in old photos Thomas had kept hidden, or perhaps in the way he sometimes stared too long at nothing. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice cautious. "I'm here to see Daniel," I said evenly. "It's urgent," she hesitated, glanced over her shoulder into the house. "He's in the backyard, come in." I followed her through the living room, cozy lived-in, toys scattered across the rug, family photos on the mantel showing Thomas smiling with children who weren't ours. My stomach twisted, but I kept walking. The sliding glass door to the backyard was open. Thomas Daniel stood near the fence, pruning shears in hand, sleeves rolled up. He didn't see me at first. Then he turned. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. The shears slipped from his fingers and clattered to the concrete. "Eleanor," he whispered. The name sounded foreign in his mouth after so long. I held out the envelope, thick, official, stamped by the court and the DA's office. "These are legal documents," I said calmly. "You need to read them." His hands shook as he took the packet. He opened it slowly, eyes scanning the pages. The invalidation of Daniel Brooks, the fraud charges, the asset freeze, the arrest warrant already issued, the restitution claim for the concealed marital property and insurance proceeds. Color drained from his face. He looked up, eyes wide with something between panic and disbelief. "What is this?" he asked hoarsely. "What did you do?" "I did nothing," I replied. "I told the truth." He glanced past me toward the house. "Does she know?" I raised my voice just enough to carry. "She knows now." Claudia appeared in the doorway behind me, confusion turning to dread as she caught the tone. "Daniel, what's going on?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. I turned to her. "I'm his wife," I said quietly. "His legal wife. We were married for 41 years. The man you know as Daniel Brooks does not exist. He faked his death 6 months ago to escape our marriage and start over here. With you. With your children." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Claudia stared at him. "Is this true?" He closed his eyes, nodded once, small, defeated. She stepped back as if the ground had shifted. "You said you were widowed. You said you had no one left." "I had someone," I said, looking straight at her. "Me." Thomas Daniel sank to his knees on the concrete patio. The pruning shears lay forgotten beside him. "Eleanor, please," he rasped. "I can explain." "It wasn't supposed to." "No," I cut in. "You've explained enough. You chose deception. You chose theft. You chose to erase me. And you let our son help you do it." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing closer. "They're coming," he said, voice breaking. "Yes." I turned to leave. Claudia stood frozen in the doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears already starting. "Eleanor," he called after me, still on his knees. "For the years we shared. For what we were." I stopped at the threshold but did not turn around. "What we were was real to me," I said. "That's why you will never understand what you destroyed." I walked through the house, past the family photos, past the children's toys, out the front door. The first patrol car turned onto the street as I reached my own car. 2 detectives stepped out, calm, professional. One nodded to me briefly. I nodded back. I didn't stay to watch them cuff him. Didn't need to see his face when they read the charges. I had seen enough. I drove away slowly, the pale green house shrinking in the rearview mirror. No tears, no trembling. Just the quiet certainty that comes when the last lie finally crumbles. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold. The house was still. For the first time in 41 years and 6 months, it felt like mine alone. 3 weeks later, the call came at dawn. My attorney's voice was gentle but firm. Eleanor, Thomas suffered a heart attack in the holding facility last night. He didn't make it. You're still listed as next of kin. The call came at 5:47 a.m., 3 weeks after the arrest. I was already awake, had been for hours, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The house was dark except for the small lamp over the stove. Outside, the first gray light of winter dawn was just beginning to press against the windows. I answered on the second ring. Eleanor, my attorney said. Her voice was quieter than usual, careful. Thomas suffered a heart attack in the holding facility last night. He was pronounced dead at 4:20 a.m. You're still listed as next of kin. I let the words settle. They landed without the crash I expected. No sharp pain, no sudden tears, just a long, slow exhale like air leaving a room that had been sealed for too long. How? I asked. Massive coronary. They tried CPR, called the paramedics. Nothing worked. He was alone in the cell when it happened. No foul play suspected. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the one Thomas used to sit in every morning, newspaper open, coffee steaming. I see, I said. There was a pause. You're entitled to make arrangements. Burial, cremation, whatever you choose. The county will cover basic costs if needed, but since you're next of kin, cremate him, I said. Scatter the ashes at sea. No service, no marker. Another pause, longer this time. Are you certain? Yes, he asked for you, she added gently. Through the public defender a few days after the arrest, said he wanted to talk. One last time. I know, I replied. I said no. She didn't argue. I'll handle the paperwork. The medical examiner will release the body once the autopsy is complete, standard procedure. I'll let you know when you can pick up the remains, or if you'd prefer, I can arrange direct transfer to a crematory. Thank you, I hung up. The kitchen clock ticked softly. For a long minute I sat motionless, listening to the house breathe. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the creak of settling beams, the distant sound of a neighbor's car starting. Ordinary sounds, life continuing. I stood, walked to the living room, and opened the drawer where I'd placed the wedding photo face down weeks earlier. I lifted it now. Thomas and I on the courthouse steps, young, laughing, certain the future was ours. I traced the edge of the frame with one finger. Then I carried it to the backyard. The grass was still damp with frost. I knelt near the spot where the old swing set used to stand, where Lucas once laughed as Thomas pushed him higher and higher. I dug a small hole with my hands, just deep enough. I placed the photo inside, glass side down. No words, no ceremony. I covered it with earth and tamped it flat. Back inside, I made fresh tea. Drank it slowly while the sun rose fully, turning the frost to glittering drops on the windows. By noon, my attorney called again. Autopsy complete. No complications. The crematory will have the remains ready in 48 hours. I've arranged for direct scattering at the coast. There's a service that does it quietly. No witnesses unless you want them. I don't, I said. Understood. And Eleanor, the restitution hearing is set for next month. The court has already frozen the remaining assets under Daniel Brooks. Claudia is cooperating. She's agreed to sell the house and return what was concealed. The marina business will be appraised and divided, half to you, half to Lucas's estate until his sentence is served. You'll have enough to live comfortably, more than enough. I thanked her. That afternoon, I drove to the marina, the place Thomas had spent so many late nights and business trips. I parked by the water and watched the boats rock gently. The sign still read Harlan Marine Supply, my name too. I didn't go inside. I just sat there until the sun began to lower, letting the salt air fill my lungs. When I got home, a single message waited on my phone from Lucas, sent through the jail system. Mom, I heard about Dad. I'm sorry for everything. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I typed back, I know, no more, no forgiveness promised, no anger spilled, just acknowledgement. I deleted the message thread and turned off the phone. That evening, I lit a small fire in the fireplace, something we hadn't done since the children were small. I sat on the rug with a blanket and watched the flames until they burned low. No ghosts rose from the ashes. No shadows lingered in the corners, just warmth, quiet, a house that finally belonged to one person. The next morning, I woke to sunlight slanting across the floor. I made coffee, opened the curtains wide. For the first time in 41 years and 6 months, the day felt like it belonged to me. Months later, as the restitution checks began to arrive and the house slowly filled with new routines, a small package appeared on my doorstep. no return address, just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside, Thomas's old wedding ring and a single folded note in Claudia's neat script. The crematory was a low, unremarkable building on the edge of town, gray siding, small parking lot, a single sign that read simply Coastal Cremation Services. No flowers in the windows, no soft music playing, just quiet efficiency. I arrived at 10:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. The receptionist handed me a plain wooden box, lighter than I expected, and a small envelope containing the certificate of cremation. No ceremony, no witnesses, exactly as I had requested. I carried the box to my car and placed it carefully on the passenger seat as if it might break. Then I drove west toward the coast. The highway wound through low hills still dusted with the last of the winter frost. I kept the radio off. The only sound was the steady hum of tires on pavement and the occasional sigh of wind against the windows. I thought about the man inside the box, not the husband I had loved for 41 years, not the father Lucas had once idolized, but the stranger who had chosen to disappear rather than face the truth. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy, and I had none left to spare. 2 hours later, I reached the Overlook, a narrow pull-off above a rocky beach where the waves crashed white against dark stones. No one else was there. Just gulls wheeling overhead and the endless gray-green of the Pacific. I walked down the short path to the water's edge, box in hand. The wind was sharp, carrying salt and the faint smell of kelp. I opened the lid. Inside. Fine gray ash, small fragments of bone. Nothing dramatic, nothing that looked like Thomas. I tilted the box toward the waves. The ash caught the breeze first, swirling up in a soft cloud, gray against the sky, then drifted down to meet the water. Some caught on the foam, some sank immediately. Within moments it was gone, carried out on the tide. I stood there until the box was empty. No words, no prayer, just the sound of the sea doing what it has always done. Taking what is given and moving on. I closed the lid, walked back to the car, and placed the empty box in the trunk. Then I sat behind the wheel for a long time, watching the horizon where water met sky. When I finally started the engine, something inside me shifted, not dramatically, not with tears or sudden revelation, but quietly, like a door closing softly behind me. Back home that evening, the restitution hearing documents waited in the mailbox, thick packet from the court, detailing the appraisal of the marina business, the sale of the pale greenhouse, the frozen accounts now being divided. Half would come to me, the other half would be held in trust until Lucas completed his sentence. I set the papers on the kitchen table and made dinner, simple pasta, the same tomato sauce I now bought without thinking of anyone else's preference. I ate alone at the table, windows open to the cool night air. Afterward, I walked through the house room by room. The bedroom. I finally cleared Thomas's side of the closet. Shirts, ties, the old wool coat he wore every winter. I folded them carefully, boxed them, and left them by the front door for donation. The living room. I rearranged the furniture, moved the couch to face the window instead of the television, brought in the small reading chair from the spare room. The mantel stayed empty for now. No photos, no reminders. Lucas's old room, I left it as it was, his childhood trophies, his college pennants. One day he might want them, or he might not. That was his choice. In the garage, I found the hammer again. This time I used it, not in anger, but deliberately. I took down the last few framed pictures that had escaped earlier purges. Our honeymoon, Lucas's graduation, a family portrait from years ago when everything still felt true. I wrapped them in newspaper and placed them in a box labeled Simply Past. I carried the box to the backyard and set it beside the spot where I had buried the wedding photo months earlier. I didn't dig another hole. I just left it there, under the open sky. That night I slept through until morning, no dreams of funerals, no waking to reach for a body that wasn't there. When I woke, sunlight slanted across the floor in warm bars. I made coffee, opened every curtain. The house felt lighter, quieter, but not empty. I sat at the table with my coffee and opened my laptop. For the first time, I searched not for answers about Thomas or Lucas, but for myself. A gardening club that met Thursdays. A watercolor class at the community center. A small trip to the mountains in spring alone, just to walk. I bookmarked them all. Later that week, the first restitution check arrived, modest but real. Enough to cover the house payment, the utilities, a little extra for whatever came next. I deposited it without ceremony. Then I walked to the backyard one last time before dark. The box of photos still sat where I left it. I opened it, took out the family portrait, the three of us smiling on a beach vacation years ago, and looked at it for a long minute. Then I placed it back inside, closed the lid, and carried the entire box to the curb for trash pickup. The truck came at dawn the next morning. I watched from the window as the boxes were lifted, crushed, carried away. No ghosts rose, no shadows lingered, just the quiet certainty that the past, like the ashes, had finally been given to the tide. Months later, as spring arrived and new routines took root, I received one final envelope. No stamp, hand-delivered, my name in Claudia's familiar handwriting. Inside, a single photograph of Thomas with the children and a short note that read simply, "He wanted you to have this, for closure." Spring arrived slowly that year, first in small green shoots pushing through the last patches of frost, then in longer days that turned the kitchen windows golden by mid-morning. The house had changed with the season. New curtains, soft linen, the color of sea glass, hung in the living room. A few potted herbs thrived on the windowsill above the sink. The mantel remained empty, but I had begun to place small things there. A smooth stone from the beach where I scattered the ashes, a watercolor postcard from the class I attended on Thursdays, a single photograph of Lucas at his high school graduation, smiling, unaware of the secrets he would one day carry. I had turned 68 that spring. The number felt less like a milestone and more like quiet proof that time continued, whether I noticed or not. I walked the river path every morning, 4 miles now, slower some days but steady. The knees complained occasionally, but the air still tasted clean and the path still led home. Lucas had been released on parole 6 months earlier. He didn't come back to the house right away. Instead, he rented a small apartment downtown, found work at a hardware store, steady hours, no management responsibilities. We spoke on the phone every Sunday evening, short conversations, careful. He asked about my walks, my classes. I asked about his job, his apartment. We didn't mention Thomas unless he brought it up first. Most weeks he didn't. That Sunday morning in early May, a small envelope appeared on my doorstep. No stamp, no postmark, just my name written in neat, feminine script I recognized immediately. Claudia's handwriting. My pulse quickened for only a second, then steadied. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and made tea before opening it. The ritual felt important, deliberate. I would not be caught off guard again. Inside, a single photograph, 4x6, glossy but not new. Thomas, older, grayer, sitting on the grass in the backyard of the pale greenhouse. 2 children on his lap, one giggling, the other holding a flower up to his face. He was smiling, genuine, unguarded, the same lopsided smile I had once loved. Tucked behind the photo, a folded note on plain white paper. "Eleanor, he wanted you to have this, for closure. He spoke of you often in the quiet moments, never with regret, only with a kind of distance, as if you were a chapter he had closed but never quite forgotten." I didn't know, not until that day on the porch. I believed the story he told me. I loved the man I thought he was. The children ask about him sometimes. I tell them he had to go away for a while. They're too young for more than that. I'm selling the house. We're moving closer to my family. The money from the sale is going toward what the court ordered. I kept nothing that wasn't mine. I don't expect forgiveness. I only wanted you to see this photo, not as proof of anything, but as evidence that some part of him remained the man you married. Claudia, I read the note twice. Then I set it beside the photograph. For a long moment I looked at the image, really looked. The children's faces were bright, trusting. Thomas's hand rested protectively on the smaller one's back. The smile was real, the moment was real. And yet, I carried the photo and note to the backyard. The spot where I had buried the wedding photo and left the box of memories was now covered in new grass, green and even. I knelt, dug a shallow hole with my fingers, and placed the photograph face down beside the hidden frame. I added the note on top. No words spoken, no tears. I covered them with earth and pressed it flat. Then I stood and looked around the yard, really looked. The flower beds needed weeding. The fence could use a fresh coat of paint. The old swing set spot was empty now, but perhaps something new could grow there. A bench, a small garden. Something of my own. Inside, I made fresh tea and sat at the table. The house was quiet but not lonely. Sunlight pooled on the floor in warm patches. Somewhere down the street, children laughed, ordinary sounds, carrying no weight of secrets. I opened my laptop and searched for something I had been thinking about for weeks. A small cottage rental on the coast for a month in summer. Just me, no agenda. Just walking, reading, listening to the waves. I booked it. That evening I called Lucas. He answered on the second ring, voice cautious, thinner than before. "Mom." Lucas, a long silence, then, "I got the letter about Dad, the ashes. I scattered them at sea," I said. "No service." He exhaled shakily. I understand." Another pause. "I'm sorry," he said again. The same words he had written months ago, but this time they sounded smaller, more honest. "I know," I replied. We didn't speak for long, no promises, no plans for visits. Just acknowledgement that the bridge between us was damaged but not entirely burned. When we hung up, I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel heavier. I simply felt present. Later, I walked to the backyard one last time before dark. The buried items were hidden now, under grass, under time. No marker, no need for one. I stood there until the sky turned the soft purple of dusk. Then I went inside, locked the door, and turned on a single lamp. The house breathed around me, settling, steady, mine. 1 year later, on the first warm day of spring, I received a single postcard from Lucas, postmarked from the prison facility. On the front, a photograph of the ocean at sunset. On the back, 3 short lines in his handwriting. Mom, I'm learning. Thank you for not letting me hide. I love you. 1 year later, the house smelled of fresh paint and coffee brewing on a Sunday morning. The walls in the living room were now a soft sage green, my choice, no one else's. The old couch had been replaced with a smaller, brighter one that faced the garden window instead of the television. Herbs still grew on the sill, and a single watercolor I had painted in class hung above the mantel. A simple seascape, waves meeting sky, no people in the frame. I had turned 68 that spring. The number felt less like a milestone and more like quiet proof that time continued, whether I noticed or not. I walked the river path every morning, 4 miles now, slower some days but steady. The knees complained occasionally, but the air still tasted clean and the path still led home. Lucas had been released on parole 6 months earlier. He didn't come back to the house right away. Instead, he rented a small apartment downtown, found work at a hardware store, steady hours, no management responsibilities. We spoke on the phone every Sunday evening, short conversations, careful. He asked about my walks, my classes. I asked about his job, his apartment. We didn't mention Thomas unless he brought it up first. Most weeks he didn't. That Sunday morning in early May, the mailbox held the usual. Bills, a gardening catalog, and one plain postcard. No envelope, just a stamp and my address in Lucas's familiar slanted handwriting. The front showed the ocean at sunset, golden light on dark water, the same stretch of coast where I had scattered the ashes a year earlier. I turned it over. On the back, 3 short lines. Mom, I'm learning. Thank you for not letting me hide. I love you. No signature needed. I stood in the driveway holding the card, sunlight warm on my shoulders. A neighbor waved from across the street. I waved back. Inside, I placed the postcard on the kitchen table beside my coffee. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply sat with it for a long time, tracing the words with one finger. Later that afternoon, I drove to the river path, not for the usual walk, but to sit on the bench near the water where Lucas and I used to feed the ducks when he was small. The ducks were still there, gliding in lazy circles. I didn't have bread, but they remembered anyway and drifted closer. I took the postcard from my pocket and read it again. I'm learning. The words carried weight, not apology, not promise, but acknowledgement. The same acknowledgement I had given him the night I said, I know, instead of I forgive. Forgiveness, I had come to understand, was not a single act. It was not a door you opened once and walked through. It was a path you walked every day, sometimes forward, sometimes circling back, sometimes standing still. Some days the path felt wide and sunlit. Other days it narrowed to a thread. Today it felt wide enough. I stayed until the sun dipped lower, painting the water gold. When I stood to leave, I tucked the postcard into my jacket pocket, not to hide it but to carry it. Back home, I placed it on the mantel beside the stone from the beach and the watercolor postcard. Not a shrine, just 3 small things that reminded me where I had been and where I was going. That evening I called Lucas. He answered quickly. Mom, Lucas, I got your postcard. A short silence. Then, I wasn't sure if you'd want it. I do, I said. Thank you. Another pause. I meant it, he said quietly. All of it. I know. We talked for a little longer about his job, about the new manager who kept forgetting names, about the stray cat that had started sleeping on his doorstep. Ordinary things, safe things. When we hung up, I didn't feel the need to say more. I made dinner pasta with the tomato sauce I now bought without thinking of anyone else's preference. I ate at the table with the windows open, listening to birds settling for the night. Afterward, I walked to the backyard. The grass was thick and green now. The spot where I had buried the photos and the note from Claudia was unmarked, overgrown. I knelt briefly, brushed a few stray leaves away, then stood again. No need to dig, no need to remember the exact place. The past was there, quiet, covered, part of the ground now. I went inside, locked the door, and turned off the lights one by one. In the bedroom, I opened the window to let in the cool night air. The bed was mine alone, sheets smoothed, pillows arranged the way I liked them, no empty side waiting. I slipped under the covers and closed my eyes. For the first time in 42 years, sleep came easily. No dreams of funerals, no reaching for a hand that wasn't there, just the soft rhythm of my own breathing, steady and sure. The next morning I woke to birdsong and sunlight. I made coffee, opened every curtain. The house breathed with me, settling, steady, alive. I stepped outside into the new day. The path ahead was open, and I was finally walking it. The end. Thank you for walking through every quiet revelation, every hard choice, every moment of reclaiming what was always yours. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of a time you had to choose truth over comfort, dignity over silence, I'd love to hear it. What lie did you finally stop carrying? Until the next story, now or never.